The blood on Lena Hart's hands wasn't hers, not yet. But it would be, if she kept working the way she had been. 18 years old, 3 jobs, and a body that had started forgetting what sleep felt like. The city didn't care. Poverty never did. And when the black car pulled up outside the bakery on that rain-soaked afternoon, she had no idea that the man stepping out of it had been counting every bruise, every missed meal, every tear she'd shed in the dark. Victor Moreau didn't save people. He collected them. And Lena had been his longest obsession. If you want to know how an invisible girl became the most dangerous man's only weakness, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. The rain came down in sheets that afternoon, turning the narrow streets of the 6th Ward into rivers of filth and forgotten dreams. Lena Hart stood behind the counter of Moretti's bakery, her hands covered in flour and small cuts that never seemed to heal. The ancient oven behind her belched heat into the cramped space, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Sweat plastered her dark hair to her forehead, but she didn't bother wiping it away. There wasn't time. "Lena, where the hell are my cannolis?" Marco Moretti's voice cut through the humid air like a rusty blade. He stood in the doorway to the back room, his stained apron stretched tight over his considerable belly, his face red from too much wine and too little patience. "Almost done, Mr. Moretti," Lena called back, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that made her bones ache. She'd been awake since 4 that morning, and it was now past 3 in the afternoon. The bakery was her second job of the day. She still had the night shift at the diner to get through. 18 years old, and she was already old. Marco grunted something unintelligible and disappeared back into his office, probably to pour another glass of the cheap red wine he kept in his desk drawer. Lena returned her attention to the display case, arranging the pastries with practiced efficiency. The bakery had been there for 40 years, serving the same neighborhood that had slowly rotted around it. The windows were grimy, the floor tiles cracked and uneven, and the whole place smelled of sugar, yeast, and desperation, just like everything else in the 6th Ward. The bell above the door chimed, and Lena looked up to see Mrs. Chen shuffling in, her shopping bag clutched to her chest like a shield. The old woman came in every Thursday for a loaf of bread and a small box of biscotti. She always counted out her coins carefully, her arthritic fingers trembling. "Hello, Mrs. Chen," Lena said, managing a smile. "The usual?" The old woman nodded, her eyes kind but tired. Everyone in the 6th Ward had that look, ground down by a city that took more than it gave, a life that demanded everything and offered nothing in return. Lena wrapped the bread and measured out the biscotti, then rang up the purchase. Mrs. Chen counted out exact change, as always, and Lena slipped an extra cookie into the bag when the old woman wasn't looking. It was a small thing, but small things mattered when you had nothing. After Mrs. Chen left, the bakery fell quiet again. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and Lena found herself staring out at the street, watching the water cascade down the glass. She thought about her mother, probably unconscious on the couch by now, surrounded by empty bottles. She thought about her younger brother, Tommy, who'd stopped going to school 3 months ago and started running with a crew that sold pills on the corner of 5th and Morrison. She thought about the eviction notice that had been taped to their apartment door last week, the 3rd one this year. She thought about how tired she was of thinking about it all. The bell chimed again. Lena turned, already reaching for the tongs to serve the next customer, but the words of greeting died in her throat. The man who walked in shouldn't have been in Moretti's bakery. Everything about him screamed money, power, and danger. His suit was dark and perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than Lena made in 6 months. His shoes gleamed despite the rain. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to fill the small shop, making it feel even more cramped than usual. His hair was dark, touched with silver at the temples, and his face was all sharp angles and hard lines. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, pale gray, cold and assessing, like a winter sky before a storm. He looked at her, and Lena felt her pulse spike with an instinct she didn't fully understand. This wasn't a man who came for bread. Behind him, the door opened again, and 2 more men entered. They were younger, harder, dressed in dark suits that didn't quite hide the bulk of weapons underneath. They took up positions on either side of the door, their eyes scanning the bakery with professional efficiency. Lena's hands gripped the edge of the counter. "Can I help you?" The man in the expensive suit stepped closer, his movements precise and controlled. "You're Lena Hart." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, cultured, with an accent she couldn't quite place, something European, refined, completely out of place in this neighborhood. "Yes," she said, her throat suddenly dry. "Do I know you?" "No." He stopped in front of the counter, his gray eyes never leaving her face. "But I know you." The air in the bakery seemed to thicken. Lena's mind raced through possibilities: debt collectors, loan sharks, someone looking for her mother or Tommy. But none of those explanations fit. Those people didn't wear suits like that. They didn't carry themselves with this kind of quiet, absolute authority. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm nobody." Something flickered in those cold eyes. Not quite amusement, but close. "You've been working here for 11 months. Before that, you were at Chen's restaurant for 8 months until the owner couldn't afford to keep you. You work nights at Murphy's Diner on weekends. You walk home alone at 2 in the morning because you can't afford the bus fare. Your mother is Ellen Hart, currently unemployed. Your brother is Thomas Hart, 15, suspected of dealing narcotics for the Costello crew." Lena's blood turned to ice. "Who the hell are you?" "My name is Victor Moreau." The name hit her like a physical blow. Everyone in the city knew that name, even in the forgotten corners of the 6th Ward. Victor Moreau wasn't just a businessman or a crime boss. He was the crime boss, the man who controlled half the city's underground economy, who had politicians and police captains on his payroll, who settled disputes with a word or a bullet depending on his mood. There were stories about him, whispered in bars and diners, tales of ruthlessness and calculated violence that made even hardened criminals nervous. And he was standing in Moretti's bakery, reciting her life story like he'd memorized it. "What do you want?" Lena managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to come with me," Victor said, as casually as if he were ordering coffee. "No." The word came out automatically, driven by fear and a stubborn survival instinct. "I'm working. I can't just leave." Victor's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. One of the men by the door moved slightly, a subtle reminder of the violence that could unfold in seconds. "Lena." Victor's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "This isn't a request. You're injured, you're exhausted, and you're going to collapse if you keep going like this. I'm offering you a way out. I don't need your help." She was shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system. "I don't know why you know about me, but I'm fine. Just leave me alone." Before Victor could respond, Marco Moretti emerged from the back room, his face flushed and irritated. "Lena, what the hell is taking so—" He stopped dead when he saw Victor. The color drained from his face so quickly that Lena thought he might faint. The wine glass in his hand trembled, then fell, shattering on the floor in a spray of red liquid and broken glass. "Mr. Moreau," Marco stammered, his earlier bluster completely gone. "I didn't know. I wasn't expecting—" "Lena Hart no longer works for you," Victor said, not bothering to look at the terrified baker. "Her final wages, plus a severance of 2 weeks, will be delivered tomorrow." Of course," Marco babbled, nodding so frantically that his jowls shook. "Whatever you say, Mr. Moreau. It's an honor to—" "Leave," Victor said quietly. Marco practically ran back into his office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. Lena stared at Victor, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. "You can't just fire me. You don't own this place." "I own the building," Victor replied, "and the 3 buildings on either side. I own Marco Moretti's debts, his supplier contracts, and his liquor license. In every way that matters, I own this bakery." He paused. "And now I'm taking you out of it." "Why?" The question burst out of her, desperate and confused. "Why do you even know who I am? I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Why would someone like you care about—" She didn't get to finish. The exhaustion that had been building for weeks, the stress, the fear, the sheer overwhelming weight of everything, it all crashed down on her at once. The room tilted, her vision blurred, and her legs buckled. She didn't hit the floor. Victor moved faster than she would have thought possible for a man his size, catching her before she fell. His arms were strong, steady, and for a moment Lena was too disoriented to do anything but lean against him. "Easy," he murmured, his voice closer now, almost tender. "I've got you." Lena tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The world swam in and out of focus. She was vaguely aware of Victor lifting her, of the rain-soaked air as they left the bakery, of being placed in the back of an expensive car with leather seats that were softer than her bed at home. Where? She started to ask, but Victor placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. Rest, he said. We'll talk when you wake up. The last thing Lena remembered before darkness claimed her was the sound of the rain on the car roof, and the strange, unsettling feeling that her life had just ended and begun in the same moment. When Lena woke, the first thing she noticed was the quiet. Real quiet, not the constant background noise of the 6th Ward. No sirens, no shouting, no rattling pipes or arguing neighbors. Just silence, broken only by the soft whisper of expensive fabric as she moved. She was in a bed, not her lumpy mattress on the floor of her tiny room, but an actual bed with a real frame, sheets that felt like silk, and pillows that cradled her head like clouds. The room around her was enormous, bigger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold. Heavy curtains covered what she assumed were windows. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals catching the light from elegant lamps positioned around the room. Panic seized her. Lena threw back the covers and discovered she was wearing clothes she didn't recognize. Soft cotton pants and a matching shirt, clearly expensive, clearly not hers. Her bakery uniform was gone. Someone had undressed her. The door opened before she could fully process that violation, and a woman entered. She was middle-aged, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Good. You're awake," the woman said. "I'm Eleanor. I look after the house. How are you feeling?" "Where am I?" Lena demanded, her voice hoarse. "Where are my clothes? What the hell is going on?" "You're at Mr. Moreau's estate," Eleanor explained calmly, apparently unfazed by Lena's agitation. "You collapsed at the bakery. He brought you here. Your clothes were soaked and dirty, so I changed you into something comfortable. I'm sorry if that startled you, but you needed rest." Lena's mind raced. Estate. Changed her clothes. Mr. Moreau's. "I need to leave," she said, swinging her legs out of bed. "I have work. I need to check on my brother. It's been 18 hours, Eleanor said gently. "You slept through the night and most of the next day. Your body needed it." 18 hours. Lena's heart hammered. Murphy's Diner would have fired her for not showing up. She'd lost a full day of wages. And Tommy, God, Tommy would be worried, or high, or both. "I need to go home," Lena said, standing up despite the dizziness that washed over her. "Now, please." "Mr. Moreau would like to speak with you first," Eleanor said. "He's waiting in his study. I'll take you there, and then you can decide what you want to do." It wasn't really a request, Lena realized. Nothing about this situation gave her any real choice. She nodded stiffly, and Eleanor led her out of the bedroom. The hallway beyond was just as opulent as the bedroom. Hardwood floors covered in expensive rugs, paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in museums, furniture that gleamed with polish and care. They walked in silence, passing room after room, until Eleanor stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. "Go ahead," Eleanor said, her expression sympathetic. "He won't hurt you, dear. That's not why you're here." Before Lena could ask what she meant by that, Eleanor turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the corridor. Lena took a breath, raised her hand, and knocked. "Come in." She opened the door and stepped into Victor Moreau's study. It was a room designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the center of the space, its surface neat and organized. Behind it, tall windows looked out onto manicured gardens that stretched as far as Lena could see. And sitting behind the desk, looking as calm and controlled as he had in the bakery, was Victor. He stood when she entered, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that seemed strange coming from a man with his reputation. "Lena," he said, "please sit." She didn't move. "I want to go home." "I know." Victor came around the desk, moving with that same precise control she'd noticed before. "But before you do, there are things you need to know." "I don't need to know anything except how to get out of here." "Your mother's debts have been paid," Victor said, ignoring her protest. "All of them. The hospital bills from last year, the payday loans, the money she owes to Castellano for the pills, everything. The eviction notice has been rescinded. Your apartment is secure." Lena stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "What?" "Your brother is at a private facility upstate," Victor continued. "Not a jail, not a rehab center, a school, a good one. He'll be safe there, away from the Costello crew and the streets. He'll finish his education. You had no right. Lena's voice cracked. You can't just take him. He's my brother, my mother. Your mother signed the paperwork this morning, Victor said. She was sober when she did it, and she understood what it meant. Thomas will be cared for, educated, and protected. Something you've been trying and failing to provide while working yourself to death. The truth of that statement hit her like a slap. Lena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Why are you doing this? Victor moved closer, and Lena fought the urge to step back. He stopped just within arm's reach, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Because I've been watching you for 3 years, he said quietly. Since you were 15 years old, working at that restaurant, trying to hold together a family that should have been taking care of you. I've watched you starve so your brother could eat. I've watched you take on more and more jobs, destroying your health and your future. I've watched you be invisible in a city that uses people like you and throws them away. That's insane, Lena whispered. Why would you watch me? I'm nobody. You're wrong. Victor's hand came up, and Lena flinched, but he only touched her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. You've never been nobody, not to me. Lena jerked away from his touch, her back hitting the bookshelf behind her. This is crazy. You're crazy. I don't know what kind of game this is, but I'm not playing. I'm leaving. She turned toward the door, but Victor's voice stopped her. If you leave now, everything I've put in place falls apart. The debts come back. Thomas comes home. The eviction proceeds, and you go back to killing yourself one shift at a time until your body gives out or something worse happens to you. Lena's hand was on the door handle. She didn't turn around. What do you want from me? I want you to stay, Victor said. Here, with me. As what? Lena forced herself to face him, anger cutting through her fear. Your maid, your cook, some kind of... As my wife. The world seemed to stop. Lena couldn't have heard that correctly. It was impossible, insane. You're out of your mind, she said, her voice shaking. I'm 18. I don't even know you. You can't just... People don't do things like this. I do, Victor said simply. I've waited 3 years for you to be old enough that the world wouldn't question it. I've removed every obstacle, paid every debt, secured every aspect of your life. I've been patient, Lena, more patient than I've ever been about anything. But my patience has limits. This is kidnapping, Lena said desperately. It's illegal. It's a choice. Victor's voice was calm, implacable. You can choose to stay here, where you'll be safe, cared for, and given every opportunity to build a real life. Where your family's debts will stay paid, and your brother will get the future he deserves. Or you can choose to leave, and watch everything I've built for you crumble, knowing that I'll still be watching from the shadows, waiting for the inevitable moment when you can't survive on your own anymore. Lena felt like she couldn't breathe. The room was too small, too warm, closing in around her. That's not a choice. That's a threat. It's reality, Victor corrected. I'm offering you something precious, Lena. Security. Safety. A life where you don't have to fight for every scrap. All you have to do is accept it. And marry you. The words tasted bitter. Belong to you. Something flickered in Victor's eyes, an emotion she couldn't name. I've belonged to you for 3 years, he said quietly. This just makes it official. Lena's legs felt weak. She slid down the bookshelf until she was sitting on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Men like Victor Moreau didn't obsess over poor girls from the 6th Ward. They didn't plan and wait and manipulate entire lives just to... You're a monster, she whispered. Yes, Victor agreed. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her, bringing himself to her level. But I'm a monster who will never let anything hurt you, who will give you everything you've been denied, who has memorized every bruise, every tear, every moment of suffering you've endured, and sworn to make sure you never experience them again. He reached out and took her hand, his grip gentle but unbreakable. I'm not asking you to love me, Lena. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to choose survival, to choose security, to choose a future instead of a slow death in a city that will never value you the way I do. Lena looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his manicured nails and her work-roughened fingers. She thought about Tommy, safe in a school somewhere upstate, instead of on a corner waiting for a bullet or an overdose. She thought about her mother, sober for the first time in years because the debts that drove her to drink were gone. She thought about the bakery, the diner, the endless grind of jobs that paid poverty wages and offered no hope of anything better. She thought about being invisible. "How long have you really been watching me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Victor said without hesitation. "Since the night you fought off 2 men trying to rob you behind Chen's restaurant. You were terrified, but you didn't scream. You grabbed a broken bottle and made them back down. I was in a car across the street, watching a deal go bad. And I saw you. 15 years old, alone, fighting with everything you had just to survive another night." His hand tightened on hers. "I've watched you every day since." It should have been horrifying. It was horrifying. But there was something in his voice, in his eyes, that made it something else too, something desperate and possessive, and utterly sincere. "I don't understand why," Lena said. "I'm not special. I'm not beautiful or talented or—" "You're everything," Victor interrupted. "Your strength without knowing it. Your loyalty to people who don't deserve it. Your kindness in a world that's tried to beat it out of you. Your survival incarnate, and you're mine." Lena closed her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of fear, tired of the constant weight of responsibility and failure. And here was someone offering to take all of it away, to shoulder the burden she'd been carrying alone for years. All she had to do was surrender. "If I stay," she said slowly, "what happens?" "You rest," Victor said. "You heal. You learn what it's like to live without fear. And when you're ready, we'll be married. After that, you'll have everything I can give you, protection, wealth, power. And I'll have what I've wanted since the moment I saw you fight those men in the alley." "What's that?" "You," Victor said simply. "Completely and absolutely mine." Lena opened her eyes and looked at him. This dangerous, powerful man who had dismantled her life and rebuilt it according to his own design, who claimed to have loved her from the shadows for years, who was offering her a cage made of gold and calling it freedom. "I want to see Tommy," she said, "and my mother. I want proof they're okay." "Tomorrow," Victor promised. "I'll take you to see Thomas at the school. Your mother is at a treatment facility getting the help she needs. You can speak with her on the phone tonight. And if I try to run?" Victor's expression didn't change, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Then I'll find you. I'll always find you, Lena, but I'd rather you chose this. Chose me. Even if it takes time." Lena took a shaky breath. "I need time to think." "You have all the time you need," Victor said. "Stay here. Rest. Eat real food. Sleep in a real bed. Learn what it feels like to be taken care of. And then decide." He stood, pulling her to her feet with him. His hands lingered on her arms, steadying her. "Eleanor will show you around," he said. "The house is yours to explore. You're not a prisoner, Lena. You can leave whenever you want. But I hope you'll stay." He released her and stepped back, returning to his desk as if he hadn't just upended her entire existence. Lena stood there for a long moment, trying to find words for what she was feeling and failing completely. Finally, she turned and walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when Victor spoke again. "Lena." She looked back. "You were never invisible to me," he said quietly. "From the first moment, you were all I could see." Lena left the study without responding, pulling the door closed behind her. Eleanor was waiting in the hallway, her expression kind and knowing. "Come on, dear," the older woman said. "Let me show you the rest of the house, and then we'll get some food in you. You're far too thin." Lena followed her numbly through the halls of Victor Moreau's estate, her mind a chaos of fear and confusion, and something else she couldn't quite name, something that felt dangerously like relief. The estate revealed itself slowly over the next 3 days, room by room, secret by secret. Lena wandered through halls that seemed to stretch forever, past libraries filled with books in languages she couldn't read, conservatories where exotic flowers bloomed despite the autumn chill outside, a music room with a grand piano that gleamed like black ice. Every space whispered of wealth so old and deep it had forgotten how to be anything else. Eleanor moved through this world with practiced ease, appearing whenever Lena seemed lost, offering food when her stomach growled, suggesting rest when exhaustion crept into her eyes. The older woman never pushed, never demanded, just provided a gentle presence that made the overwhelming luxury slightly more bearable. On the second day, Lena found herself in what Eleanor called the morning room, staring out windows that overlooked gardens designed with mathematical precision. Victor appeared in the doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, less formal than the suit he'd worn in the bakery, but no less commanding. "I promised you could see Thomas today," he said without preamble. "Are you ready?" Lena turned from the window, her arms wrapped around herself. She'd been wearing clothes that Eleanor provided, all of them perfectly sized, all of them more expensive than anything she'd owned in her life. Today it was soft jeans and a cashmere sweater that felt like touching clouds. She hated how comfortable they were. "Yes," she said. The drive took 2 hours, Victor's car gliding through traffic like it existed in a different dimension from the ordinary vehicles around it. They didn't speak much. Lena watched the city transform through the windows, the broken streets of the 6th Ward giving way to nicer neighborhoods, then suburbs, then countryside she'd only seen in photographs. Victor occasionally glanced at her, but seemed content to let the silence stand. The school sat on a hill surrounded by autumn trees, a sprawling campus of brick buildings and green lawns that looked like something from a movie. Students walked between classes in small groups, their laughter carrying on the wind. They looked healthy, clean, purposeful. Nothing like the hollow-eyed kids from Lena's neighborhood. A woman in a crisp blazer met them at the main building. "Mr. Moreau, Miss Hart, welcome. Thomas is waiting in the visitors center." They followed her through corridors lined with achievement awards and photographs of students in laboratories, art studios, on athletic fields. Lena felt something tight in her chest loosening slightly with each step. This was real. Tommy was really here. The visitor center was a comfortable room with large windows and furniture that actually matched. And sitting on one of the sofas, looking cleaner and healthier than Lena had seen him in months, was her brother. "Tommy," she breathed. He looked up, and his face split into a grin. "Lena!" She crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled him into a fierce hug. He was taller than when she'd last held him properly, his shoulders broader, but he was still her little brother, still the kid she'd protected and worried over and loved despite everything. "Are you okay?" she asked, pulling back to look at him properly. His eyes were clear, actually clear, not glassy or distant or half-focused the way they'd been for months. "Are they treating you right?" "If anyone's hurt you, I'm fine," Tommy said, laughing a little. "Better than fine. Lena, this place is incredible. The food is amazing, and I have my own room, and the teachers actually care if you learn things. I'm taking chemistry and history, and they have this art program." He stopped, seeming to realize he was babbling. "How are you? Where have you been? Mom said you were staying with a friend, but she was weird about it." Lena glanced back at Victor, who had positioned himself near the door, giving them space but never quite leaving. His gray eyes met hers, and she saw a question there. How much would she tell? How much truth could she bear to speak? "I'm staying somewhere safe," Lena said, carefully, turning back to Tommy. "Things have changed. Mom's in treatment, getting help. Our debts are paid. You're here. Everything's different now." "Because of him?" Tommy's voice dropped, and he looked past Lena to where Victor stood. "Mom mentioned someone helped us. That's him, right? Mr. Moreau?" "Yes," Lena said. Tommy studied Victor with the blunt assessment of a 15-year-old who'd seen too much of the world's darkness. "I know who you are," he said. "Guys on the street talk about you. They're scared of you." "Good," Victor said mildly. "Fear keeps people honest." "Why are you helping us?" Tommy asked. "People like you don't do things for free." "Tommy," Lena started, but Victor raised a hand. "He's right to ask," Victor said, moving closer. He sat in a chair across from the sofa, his posture relaxed but his attention focused entirely on Tommy. "I'm helping because your sister matters to me, and what matters to her matters to me. That includes you." "You in love with her or something?" Tommy asked, with the tactless directness of youth. Lena's face burned. "Tommy, God!" "Yes," Victor said simply. The word hung in the air like a held breath. Lena stared at Victor, and he looked back at her with complete calm, as if he'd just commented on the weather rather than declaring his feelings in front of her teenage brother. Tommy's eyes widened. "Oh, okay. That's... wow." He looked at Lena. "Did you know about this?" "It's complicated," Lena managed. "It's not," Victor corrected. "I love your sister. I intend to marry her. In the meantime, I'm ensuring that both of you have the opportunities and safety you deserve. There's nothing complicated about it." Dude, that's super complicated, Tommy said, then seemed to remember who he was talking to and added hastily, Sir, Mr. Moreau. Sorry. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Victor's face. You can call me Victor. You're going to be family, after all. They stayed for another hour. Tommy showed Lena his room, his classes, introduced her to a few students he'd befriended. The whole time, Victor remained a quiet presence, watching them interact with an expression that Lena was starting to recognize. Satisfaction mixed with something fiercer, more possessive. He'd orchestrated this, she realized. He'd built this reality where Tommy was safe and thriving, and he'd done it as casually as other people might buy groceries. On the drive back, Lena finally broke the silence. You shouldn't have told him you loved me. Why not? Victor kept his eyes on the road. It's true. You don't know me well enough to love me. I know you better than anyone alive, Victor said. I know you bite your lower lip when you're anxious. I know you give away food even when you're hungry. I know you sing to yourself when you think no one can hear, old songs your grandmother taught you. I know you're afraid of storms because your father died in one. I know you dream about the ocean even though you've never seen it. I know every scar on your hands and how you got them. Should I continue? Lena's hands clenched in her lap. That's not knowing someone. That's stalking them. Perhaps, Victor allowed, but it's also devotion. I've spent 3 years learning everything about you, Lena. Your fears, your hopes, your habits, your wounds. I know you in ways you don't know yourself. That might not be conventional love, but it's more thorough than what most people build in a lifetime. It's obsession, Lena said quietly. Yes, Victor agreed. It is. I've never pretended otherwise. They drove in silence for a while longer. The autumn landscape blurred past, trees aflame with color against a gray sky that threatened rain. I want to talk to my mother, Lena said finally. Tonight, Victor promised, when we get back. The estate felt different when they returned, less like a prison and more like a puzzle she was slowly learning to navigate. Eleanor had dinner waiting, real food, multiple courses, served in a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Victor sat at one end, Lena at the other, the distance between them filled with silver and crystal and the weight of everything unspoken. You're not eating, Victor observed. Lena looked down at her plate. The food was incredible, the kind of meal she'd never imagined tasting, but her stomach was knotted too tight to appreciate it. I can't stop thinking about why, she said. Why me? You could have anyone, women who are beautiful, educated, who actually belong in this world. Why would you fixate on some girl from the 6th Ward? Victor set down his fork with careful precision. Do you remember the night you were attacked, behind Chen's restaurant? Lena's hand instinctively went to her ribs, where a scar from that night still marked her skin. You mentioned it before. You said you saw it happen. I was there for business, Victor said. A deal that went wrong. I watched one of my associates get shot, watched 2 others die. And in the middle of that violence, in the middle of blood and chaos, I saw you. 15 years old, carrying trash to the dumpster, completely unaware that you'd walked into a crime scene. He leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes distant with memory. The men who attacked you were trying to eliminate witnesses. They came at you with knives, and you should have died. You should have screamed and run and died anyway. But you didn't. He stood and walked toward her, his movements controlled and predatory. Lena's heart hammered, but she didn't move as he stopped beside her chair. You grabbed a broken bottle, Victor continued, his voice low and intense. Your hands were shaking so badly you were bleeding from holding it. But you didn't drop it. You stood your ground and you made yourself into something too dangerous to touch easily. And when they finally backed off, when you were alone again, you didn't cry. You finished taking out the trash and went back to work like nothing had happened. His hand came to rest on the back of her chair. I sent my men to clean up the bodies and deal with the failed deal. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. That stubborn, terrified, magnificent survival instinct. I had to know more. So you started watching me, Lena said, her voice unsteady. I started protecting you, Victor corrected. Do you know how many times you should have been hurt in the last 3 years? Assaulted, robbed, worse. But somehow, the men who might have targeted you always ended up having problems of their own. Your mother's dealers who got too aggressive suddenly had visits from police. The landlords who tried to force you into paying rent in ways other than money found themselves under investigation. Your supervisors who looked at you wrong learned very quickly that certain women in this city are under protection they can't see. Lena turned in her chair to look up at him. That was you? All of it, Victor said. Every moment you thought you were lucky, every time danger somehow missed you. I was there, in the shadows, making sure the world couldn't touch you. His hand moved from the chair to her face, tilting her chin up. You survived on your own strength for so long, Lena. But you shouldn't have had to, and now you don't. She should have pulled away. Should have been horrified by this confession of manipulation and control. But looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute conviction there, Lena felt something shift inside her. This wasn't a fairy tale. Victor wasn't a Prince Charming. He was exactly what he appeared to be. A dangerous man who decided she belonged to him and had spent years making that reality. The terrifying part was how seductive it felt to surrender to it. I need to call my mother, she said, pulling back from his touch. Victor studied her for a moment, then nodded. He led her to his study and handed her a phone, then moved to stand by the windows, giving her the illusion of privacy. Lena dialed the number Eleanor had written down for her. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Mom? Lena's voice cracked despite her best efforts. Lena, baby, oh God! Her mother's voice was clear, shockingly, painfully clear, without the slur that had become its constant companion. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm fine, Lena said. Mom, are you really in treatment? Are they helping you? It's hard, her mother admitted. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But yes, they're helping. I'm sober, Lena. Actually sober for the first time since your father died. I can think clearly, and I hate it, and I need it, and I'm so sorry. Tears burned in Lena's eyes. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do, her mother interrupted. I failed you. I let you carry everything while I drowned myself in bottles and pills. I let Tommy slip away. I let us lose everything. And when that man came to me with his offer, his deal to fix everything, I should have protected you, should have told him to go to hell. But I was so tired, Lena, so tired and broken and useless. So I signed his papers and took his help, and I gave him permission to... She choked on a sob. I gave him my daughter. Lena's gaze found Victor across the room. He was watching the gardens, apparently absorbed in the view, but she knew he was listening to every word. He told me you signed papers for Tommy's school, Lena said carefully. I signed more than that, her mother said. He had lawyers, real ones, with documents about debts and custody and consent. He asked my permission to marry you, Lena, like we were living in some other century. And I gave it because he'd already paid for everything, already fixed everything, and I was terrified of what would happen if I said no. She was crying openly now. I'm your mother. I should have protected you. Instead, I sold you to make my own life easier. Mom, stop, Lena said firmly. You didn't sell me. You gave Tommy a chance at a real life. You got yourself into treatment. Those aren't bad things. But I'm fine, Lena repeated, though she wasn't sure if it was true. He's not hurting me. It's complicated. But I'm safe. They talked for a few more minutes, her mother alternating between apologies and updates on her treatment, until Lena couldn't bear any more emotion. She promised to call again soon and hung up. Victor turned from the window. She loves you, he said quietly. In her way. Through her damage. She gave you permission to marry me like I'm property to be transferred, Lena said, anger flaring hot and bright. Like she has any right to make that choice. She doesn't, Victor agreed. The only person who can make that choice is you, but having her blessing makes things simpler legally, and it means she can maintain her treatment and Thomas can stay at his school without complications. Everything with you comes with strings, Lena said bitterly. Everything in life comes with strings, Victor countered. I'm just honest about what they are. He moved closer, each step deliberate. You're angry. Good. Anger is better than numbness. It means you're feeling something real. I'm angry because you've taken over my entire life, Lena snapped. You've paid off debts I didn't ask you to pay, moved people I love, made decisions about my future without consulting me. You say I have choices, but every choice you've given me is designed to make me stay. Yes, Victor said simply. I won't apologize for wanting to keep you, Lena. I won't pretend this is anything other than what it is. I've orchestrated circumstances to make leaving painful and staying comfortable. That's the truth. But the choice itself remains real. You can walk out that door right now. I won't stop you. And everything falls apart, Lena said. Tommy comes home, Mom relapses, the debts come back. You've built a prison out of kindness. I've built you a life out of ruins, Victor corrected, his voice hardening slightly. You were dying by inches in that city, Lena, working 3 jobs and starving anyway, watching your brother drift toward a bullet or an overdose, watching your mother drown. You had no future, no hope, nothing but endless exhaustion until your body gave out or something worse happened. I gave you a way out. You gave me a cage, Lena shot back. Then decorate the cage, Victor said, moving close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Make it yours. Take everything I'm offering and use it however you want. Go to school, start a business, travel the world, do nothing at all. I don't care what you do with your days as long as you come home to me at night. Why? Lena demanded, the question torn from somewhere deep and desperate. Why do you want this? Why do you want me? Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. Because when I watched you fight in that alley, I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure survival instinct mixed with stubborn grace. You were terrified, but you didn't break. And I realized I'd spent my entire life surrounded by people who bend or break under pressure, who compromise themselves for comfort or power. But you held a broken bottle with bleeding hands and refused to surrender. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I've built an empire on fear and force, Lena, but I've never found anyone worth keeping until I found you. You're the only thing in this world I want that I can't simply take. You've already taken me, Lena whispered. No, Victor said. I've taken the obstacles away. I've cleared the path. But you're still standing here of your own will, still fighting, still deciding. When you're finally mine, it won't be because I forced it. It'll be because you chose it. Lena's breath caught. She was trapped between his body and the desk behind her, his hand on her face, his eyes seeing through every defense she tried to build. And the worst part was how much she wanted to stop fighting. How seductive it was to imagine just giving in, accepting the safety and comfort he offered, letting someone else carry the weight she'd been holding alone for so long. I don't love you, she said, needing to establish that boundary even as everything else crumbled. I know, Victor said, but you will. It wasn't arrogance in his voice. It was certainty, patient and absolute. He stepped back, releasing her, and the sudden absence of his presence felt like cold water. You're tired, he said, his tone shifting to something almost gentle. Eleanor will show you to your room. Tomorrow we can discuss what comes next. Lena nodded mutely, not trusting her voice. She moved toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Lena. She looked back. Thank you for giving this a chance, Victor said, for not running yet. I know it's not easy. Nothing about this is easy, Lena said. No, Victor agreed. But easy things aren't worth having. Lena left the study and found Eleanor waiting in the hallway, as if she'd sensed when she'd be needed. The older woman led her back through the maze of corridors to the bedroom Lena had woken in days ago. He's not what people think, Eleanor said as they walked. Mr. Moreau. He's hard, yes, and dangerous, but he's also capable of profound loyalty. When he cares about something, he protects it absolutely. He's a criminal, Lena said. He's a man who operates outside conventional morality, Eleanor corrected. But he has his own code, and that code includes never harming those under his protection. She paused outside Lena's door. He's been alone for a very long time, dear. Surrounded by people, but truly alone. Until he saw you. He doesn't know me, Lena protested, the same argument she'd made to Victor. He knows what matters, Eleanor said gently, and he's offering you a choice most people never get. The choice to be cherished instead of used. That's rare in this world. Rarer than you might think. She patted Lena's hand. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be easier. But as Lena lay in the too soft bed in the too beautiful room, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything that had happened, she knew Eleanor was wrong. Tomorrow wouldn't be easier. Because tomorrow she'd have to start making real decisions. Tomorrow she'd have to confront the truth that was crystallizing in her mind with terrifying clarity. Victor Moreau had built her a gilded cage, yes. But he'd also saved her life, saved Tommy's life, saved her mother's life. He'd given them all a future when they'd had nothing but slow decay ahead of them. And the price he was asking, her presence, her eventual agreement to marriage, her surrender to his obsession, was that really so high? Lena rolled onto her side, pulling the silk sheets close, and let herself acknowledge the thought she'd been fighting since that moment in the bakery when he'd caught her before she fell. She didn't want to leave. She was terrified of staying, terrified of what it meant to give herself to someone like Victor Moreau. But she was equally terrified of going back to that life of grinding poverty and hopelessness, of watching Tommy slip away and her mother drown and her own future narrow to nothing but exhaustion and survival. Victor had been right about one thing. He'd given her a choice. It wasn't a fair choice, wasn't even a good choice, but it was real. And Lena was starting to realize which option she would choose. Sleep, when it finally came, was heavy and dreamless. She woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in the curtains and the smell of coffee and fresh bread. A note on the bedside table, written in elegant script, "Join me for breakfast when you're ready. The Conservatory, V." Lena showered in the marble bathroom, dressed in clothes that Eleanor had somehow acquired that fit perfectly, and made her way downstairs. She was learning the house's geography, starting to understand which turns led where, which rooms held what purposes. The conservatory was glass and light, filled with plants that shouldn't have survived this far north, but thrived anyway under Victor's care or money or will. He sat at a small table near the windows, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression softened. "Good morning." "Morning," Lena said, sitting across from him. Breakfast appeared as if summoned, Eleanor or some other invisible staff member providing plates of food that smelled incredible. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Victor set down his coffee and looked at her directly. "I have a question for you," he said. "Okay? If I gave you a bank account with enough money to disappear, to start fresh anywhere in the world, away from me and this life and all of it, would you take it?" Lena's hand froze halfway to her cup. "What?" "Would you take it?" Victor repeated. "Complete freedom. Enough money to build whatever life you want. No strings, no conditions, no consequences for Tommy or your mother. Just you, free and clear." It was a test. It had to be. But looking into his eyes, Lena saw only genuine curiosity, as if he truly didn't know what she'd answer. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I need to know," Victor said simply. "I need to know if what I'm building here is a prison or a home. I need to know if you stay because you want to or because you're afraid not to." Lena set down her fork carefully. She thought about it, really thought about it. Imagine taking his money and running, going somewhere far away, starting over, being free of this complicated, terrifying situation, and realize that she'd be running toward nothing, toward loneliness and uncertainty and the same struggles in a different location, toward leaving behind Tommy's safety and her mother's recovery, toward abandoning the first person who'd ever looked at her and seen something worth keeping. "No," she said quietly. "I wouldn't take it." Victor went very still. "Why not?" "Because running would mean giving up everything good that's come from this," Lena said, the words coming slowly as she worked through her own thoughts. "Tommy's school, Mom's treatment, and—" She met his eyes. "And whatever this is between us, I don't understand it. I'm terrified of it. But I don't want to run from it either." Something blazed in Victor's expression, triumph and relief and hunger all mixed together. He stood and moved around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms before she could react. "Say it again," he demanded, his hands framing her face. "I'm not leaving," Lena said, her heart hammering. "I'm choosing this, choosing to stay. Even though you're arrogant and controlling and you've manipulated my entire life, I'm staying." Victor kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was possession and claim and 3 years of waiting, finally breaking free. Lena gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it, her hands clutching his shoulders just to stay upright. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "You're mine now," Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. "Completely mine." "I know," Lena whispered. And terrifying as it was, she meant it. The kiss changed everything and nothing. Victor pulled back slowly, his hand still cradling Lena's face like she was something precious and breakable, his gray eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her chest tight. "I've wanted to do that since the night I first saw you," he said, his voice low and rough. 3 years of watching you from the shadows, memorizing the way you move, the way you speak. 3 years of imagining what it would feel like to finally touch you without hiding. Lena's hands were still gripping his shoulders, her knees weak, and her mind spinning. This is insane, she whispered. Everything about this is insane. Yes, Victor agreed. He traced his thumb along her jawline, the gesture achingly tender. But you're staying anyway. It wasn't a question, but Lena nodded. She'd made her choice in that moment of brutal honesty, admitting she wouldn't take his hypothetical escape. Now she had to live with the consequences. Victor released her and stepped back, and Lena immediately felt the absence of his warmth like a physical loss. He returned to his seat at the breakfast table, his movements controlled and precise, though something wild still burned behind his eyes. Sit, he said. Finish your breakfast. We need to talk about what comes next. Lena sat, though food was the last thing on her mind. Her lips still tingled from the kiss, and her heart hadn't stopped racing. She picked up her coffee cup just to have something to do with her hands. What happens now? She asked. Now we establish the terms, Victor said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, though the heat hadn't completely left his gaze. You've agreed to stay. That means we move forward with the marriage. But I want you to understand exactly what you're agreeing to. I thought I was agreeing to safety and security, Lena said, trying to match his clinical tone and failing. You're agreeing to belong to me, Victor corrected. Completely and absolutely. That's not the same as safety, Lena. That's ownership. The word should have made her angry, should have sent her running for the door despite everything she'd just said. But instead, it sent a different kind of shiver through her, part fear, part something darker she didn't want to examine too closely. Explain, she said. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling focus that made her feel transparent. I'm not a good man. You need to understand that from the beginning. I've killed people who threatened what's mine. I've destroyed businesses, ruined families, ended lives with a word or a gesture. I operate outside the law because the law doesn't apply to men like me. And when you marry me, you'll be stepping into that world. You'll be mine to protect, mine to provide for, and mine to control. Control, Lena repeated, the word tasting bitter. I won't lie to you about what I am, Victor said. I'm obsessive, possessive. I don't share, I don't compromise, and I don't tolerate threats to what belongs to me. When you become my wife, you'll have wealth beyond measure and power most people only dream of. But you'll also have restrictions, guards who follow you, limits on where you can go and who you can see. My presence in every aspect of your life, whether you want it or not. Lena set down her cup with a sharp click. That sounds like a prison with better furniture. It's protection, Victor countered. The moment you marry me, you become a target. Every enemy I've made, every rival who wants to hurt me, will see you as the easiest way to do it. I won't allow that. So yes, there will be guards. Yes, there will be restrictions, because the alternative is watching you die, and that's not something I can survive. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. He wasn't trying to make it sound romantic or acceptable. He was laying out the brutal reality of what her life would become, and he was doing it with the cold precision of a business transaction. What if I can't live like that? Lena asked. What if I need freedom more than I need safety? Then we'll find a balance, Victor said. I'm not unreasonable, Lena. I know this is an adjustment, but understand this. I will never, ever risk losing you. Not to violence, not to circumstance, and not to your own recklessness. You're mine now. That means I protect what's mine, even from yourself if necessary. Lena stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. She moved to the conservatory windows, staring out at the manicured gardens without really seeing them. Her reflection stared back at her. A girl who looked lost and small in expensive clothes she hadn't chosen, standing in a house that wasn't hers, having just agreed to marry a man who spoke about ownership like it was love. You said you've been watching me for 3 years, she said without turning around. Tell me the truth. All of it. I want to know exactly how deep this obsession goes. Behind her, she heard Victor stand. His footsteps were quiet on the tiled floor as he approached, stopping just close enough that she could feel his presence, but not touching. I know your favorite color is blue, he said quietly. Not the bright blue of summer skies, but the deep blue of twilight just before dark. I know you hum when you're nervous, usually the same song your grandmother taught you when you were 6. I know you're afraid of enclosed spaces because you got locked in a closet when you were 7 and your mother was too drunk to hear you screaming. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar because it reminds you of better days. I know you cry in the shower so no one can hear you. I know you've never been to the ocean, but you dream about it constantly. I know every scar on your body and every story behind them. Lena's hands pressed against the glass, her breath fogging the window. How? How could you possibly know all that? I told you, Victor said. I've been watching, learning, collecting pieces of you like treasure. Your old landlord was easy to bribe for information. Your coworkers talked freely for the right price. I had cameras installed in places you frequented. I read every social media post you've ever made, followed every digital footprint. I built a profile of you so complete that I know you better than you know yourself. Lena spun around, anger finally breaking through the shock. That's not love, Victor. That's stalking. That's sick. I never said it was healthy, Victor replied, his expression unchanged. I said it was obsession. I said it was devotion. But you want to know the depth of it? Fine. Let me tell you about the night I almost killed a man in front of you. That stopped Lena's building tirade. What? 6 months ago, Victor said, his voice taking on a harder edge. You were walking home from Murphy's Diner at 2 a.m. A man followed you for 3 blocks. He was high, aggressive, and he had a knife. You didn't notice him because you were exhausted and distracted, but I noticed. I was in a car 2 blocks away, and I watched him close the distance. I watched him reach for you. Lena's hand went to her throat, remembering that night. She'd felt uneasy walking home, had hurried her steps, but nothing had happened, or so she'd thought. My driver had to physically restrain me from getting out of the car, Victor continued, and for the first time she heard real emotion crack through his controlled exterior. Because if I'd reached him, I would have torn him apart with my bare hands. I would have made him suffer for daring to threaten you, but that would have exposed my surveillance, would have shown you that someone was watching. So instead, I sent 2 of my men. They intercepted him in the alley. He spent 6 months in the hospital recovering from what they did to him. Oh my God, Lena breathed. That's who I am, Victor said flatly. That's the depth of my obsession. I've had 14 people hurt or killed in the last 3 years for the crime of threatening you. You don't know about any of them, because I made sure you never would. The dealer who tried to force you to run drugs for him? He's in the river. The supervisor at the restaurant who cornered you in the supply closet? He'll never walk again. Every person who ever tried to hurt you, use you, or take advantage of you has paid for it in ways you can't imagine. Lena felt her legs give out. She sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. You're telling me you've been murdering people in my name for 3 years? I'm telling you I've been protecting you, Victor corrected. There's a difference. Those people made choices. They chose to threaten what's mine. They paid the consequences. I'm not yours, Lena said weakly, though the protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. Victor crossed to her in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her chair, bringing them eye to eye. He took her hands in his, and she was too shocked to pull away. You've been mine since that night in the alley, he said, his voice intense and unwavering. Since I watched you stand your ground against men twice your size with nothing but a broken bottle and raw courage. Since I realized I'd found something in this world worth keeping, worth protecting, worth building an empire around. You can deny it, you can hate it, but it doesn't change the truth. You're mine, Lena Hart. You have been for 3 years. The marriage is just making it official. Tears burned in Lena's eyes. This isn't normal. This isn't how people fall in love. I'm not normal people, Victor said. And this isn't falling in love. This is obsession. This is possession. This is 3 years of patient planning coming to fruition. But don't mistake my honesty for cruelty, Lena. I'm telling you these things because you deserve to know what you're stepping into. You deserve to make this choice with your eyes open. You said I had a choice, Lena said, her voice shaking. But you've just told me you've been controlling my life for 3 years, eliminating threats I didn't even know existed, orchestrating everything from the shadows. What choice did I ever really have? Victor's grip on her hands tightened. The choice to leave. Right now. Today. I'll have a car take you anywhere you want to go. I'll set up the bank account I mentioned. You can disappear, and I'll let you go. But? Lena asked, because there was always a but with him. But I'll never stop watching, Victor said simply. I'll never stop protecting you from the shadows. I'll never stop wanting you. I'll give you freedom, Lena, but I can't give you my indifference. That's not something I'm capable of. Lena pulled her hands free and stood, needing space to think. She paced the conservatory, her mind a chaos of fear and anger and something else, something that felt dangerously like acceptance. You're asking me to marry you, she said finally. To legally bind myself to someone who's admitting he's obsessive, possessive, and has killed people. To step into a life where I'll be watched and controlled and owned. And you're presenting this like it's some kind of gift. It is a gift, Victor said, rising to his feet. Safety is a gift. Security is a gift. Knowing that someone will move heaven and earth to protect you, that you'll never be invisible or forgotten again, that you matter so completely to someone that they've spent 3 years of their life ensuring your survival, that's a gift most people never receive. It's also terrifying. Yes, Victor agreed. But tell me honestly, Lena, is it more terrifying than going back? More terrifying than watching Tommy end up dead or in prison? More terrifying than watching your mother drink herself to death while you work yourself into an early grave? More terrifying than being invisible in a city that uses people like you as disposable labor? Lena stopped pacing and faced him. You're not giving me a real choice. You're giving me the illusion of choice while making sure every other option is worse. That's called strategy, Victor said, and it's how I've survived in a world that eats the weak. But the choice itself is still real. You can walk away from this. From me. I won't stop you. Just watch me from the shadows forever, Lena said bitterly. Yes, Victor confirmed without hesitation. I told you, I can't give you my indifference, but I can give you distance if that's what you need. Lena sank back into her chair, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. I don't know what I need. I don't know how to process any of this. 3 days ago, I was working at a bakery, and now I'm standing in a mansion listening to a crime lord explain how many people he's killed to protect me. It's too much. Victor moved to stand before her again, but this time he didn't kneel. He stood tall and imposing, every inch the dangerous man he claimed to be. Then let me make this simple, he said. I'm offering you a contract. Marriage, security, protection, wealth, power. In exchange, you give me your presence, your eventual acceptance, and the legal right to call you mine. Everything else, your feelings, your trust, your love, those I'll earn over time. But the contract itself, the basic agreement, that needs to happen now. Why now? Lena asked. Why the rush? For the first time, Victor's expression showed something like vulnerability. Because waiting is killing me. Because every day you're not legally mine is a day something could go wrong. Because I've been patient for 3 years and my patience has limits. He paused. And because the longer you stay here without committing, the more people in my world will see you as a weakness rather than a strength, as something to target rather than something to fear. So marrying you makes me safer, Lena said slowly. Marrying me makes you untouchable, Victor corrected. It makes you family. And in my world, family is sacred. No one touches what belongs to Victor Moreau. Not without consequences that make death seem merciful. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, saw past the expensive clothes and cultured accent to the predator underneath. Saw the man who'd spent 3 years obsessing over a girl he'd seen fight in an alley, who'd orchestrated her entire life from the shadows, who'd killed without hesitation to protect her. Saw the monster he'd admitted to being. And she saw something else, too. She saw the way his hands trembled slightly when he touched her, like she was precious. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about wanting her. She saw the careful restraint he'd shown despite his admitted obsession, never forcing himself on her, always giving her the illusion of choice, even when they both knew the game was rigged. When? She heard herself ask. Victor's expression shifted, something fierce and triumphant blazing in his eyes. When what? When do you want to do this? The marriage. 2 weeks, Victor said immediately. I'll arrange everything. A private ceremony, just us and the required witnesses. Nothing public, nothing ostentatious, just the legal binding that makes you mine in the eyes of the law. 2 weeks, Lena repeated, the time frame feeling both too fast and somehow inevitable. And after? What happens after we're married? After, we learn to live together, Victor said. You learn to navigate my world, and I learn to give you the space you need. We build something between us that's more than just obsession and survival. We make this work. And if it doesn't work, Lena asked, if I can't adapt, if I hate this life, if I can't stand being owned, Victor's jaw tightened. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But I have faith in you, Lena. You've survived worse than being married to a man who worships you. You don't worship me, Lena said. You own me. There's a difference. With me, they're the same thing, Victor said. He extended his hand and Lena stared at it for a long moment. This was it. The final choice. She could take his hand and seal her fate, or she could refuse and step back into uncertainty. She thought about Tommy, safe and thriving in his school. She thought about her mother, fighting for sobriety and treatment. She thought about the bakery, the diner, the endless exhaustion of poverty and invisibility. She thought about being protected, even if that protection came wrapped in obsession and control. And she thought about the kiss, about the way Victor's hands had framed her face like she was something precious, about the desperate hunger in his eyes when she'd said she wouldn't leave. Lena took his hand. Victor pulled her to her feet and into his arms in one smooth motion, holding her tight against him. She felt his heart hammering against her chest, felt the tension in his muscles, and realized he'd been afraid she'd refuse. The most powerful man in the city, afraid of losing a girl from the 6th Ward. "You won't regret this," he murmured against her hair. "I already regret this," Lena said, but she didn't pull away. "I just don't have a better option." "You will," Victor promised. "I'll make sure of it. I'll make sure this becomes the best choice you ever made." He released her slowly, and Lena saw something shift in his expression, satisfaction, relief, and that hunger that never quite left his eyes when he looked at her. "There's something else we need to discuss," he said, his tone becoming businesslike again. "The prenuptial agreement." Lena blinked. "I don't have anything. What would I possibly need a prenup for?" "It's not about what you have," Victor said. "It's about what you'll have access to. My lawyers have prepared documents that will give you certain protections and guarantees. In the event of my death, you inherit everything. In the event of divorce, which I have no intention of allowing but must account for legally, you receive a substantial settlement. The terms are generous, Lena, almost absurdly so, but I want you to have them reviewed by an independent attorney before you sign anything." "You want me to have a lawyer look at it?" Lena said slowly. "Even though we both know I'm going to sign whatever you put in front of me." "I want you to understand what you're signing," Victor corrected. "I want there to be no confusion, no surprises, no claims later that you didn't know what you were agreeing to. This is a binding legal contract, Lena. It deserves proper attention." Despite everything, Lena felt a flicker of something like gratitude. He was being meticulous, ensuring she couldn't claim ignorance or coercion. In his own twisted way, he was trying to be fair. "Fine," she said. "I'll read it. I'll have someone look at it. But Victor, I need something from you too." "Name it," he said immediately. "I need you to promise me that Tommy stays safe no matter what happens between us," Lena said. "Even if this marriage falls apart, even if I do something that makes you hate me, Tommy's school and Mom's treatment continue. They don't become bargaining chips." Victor's expression hardened. "You think I'd use your family against you?" "I think you're capable of anything," Lena said honestly. "And I need to know they're protected from that." For a long moment, Victor just looked at her. Then he nodded slowly. "I give you my word. Thomas and Ellen will be cared for regardless of what happens between us. They're not leverage. They never were. They were simply obstacles I removed to clear the path to you." "Your word," Lena repeated. "The word of a man who's admitted to killing people." "The word of a man who has never broken a promise," Victor said. "In my world, your word is your bond. Break it, and you're worthless. I've built my reputation on reliability, Lena. When I promise something, it happens. And I promise you this, your family is safe. Forever." Lena wanted to believe him. More than that, she needed to believe him. Because if she couldn't trust this one promise, then everything else was built on sand. "Okay," she said. 2 weeks. A wedding, and then we figure out how to make this nightmare work." Victor smiled, and it was a smile of pure triumph. "It won't be a nightmare," he said. "It'll be exactly what you need it to be. You just don't know it yet." He leaned in and kissed her again, slower this time, more controlled. When he pulled back, Lena was breathless and dizzy and terrified of how much she was starting to crave his touch. "I have business to attend to," Victor said. "Eleanor will help you with anything you need today. Tomorrow, we'll go into the city. I want to introduce you to my world properly. And Lena?" He touched her cheek gently. "Thank you for choosing me. Even if you think you didn't have a choice, thank you for staying." He left the conservatory and Lena sank back into her chair, her mind spinning. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, she'd be married to Victor Moreau, bound to him legally, financially, and in every way that mattered. The terrifying part was that she wasn't running. The even more terrifying part was that she was starting to wonder if she'd ever really wanted to. Eleanor found Lena still sitting in the conservatory an hour later, staring at nothing, her coffee long since gone cold. The older woman didn't say anything at first, just quietly cleared the breakfast dishes and poured fresh coffee, adding the precise amount of sugar that Lena preferred. The small gesture of familiarity should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded Lena that everyone in this house knew things about her that she hadn't chosen to share. "He told you, didn't he?" Eleanor said finally, settling into the chair Victor had vacated. "About what he's done. What he is." Lena's laugh was brittle. "He told me he's been stalking me for 3 years and murdering people who got too close, so yes, I'd say he was thorough." "And you're still here." "I don't know where else to go," Lena admitted. "That's the problem, isn't it? He's made sure I don't have anywhere else to go." Eleanor's expression was sympathetic, but not pitying. "That's not entirely true, dear. You could leave right now. He wouldn't stop you. He told you that himself." "He just watched me from the shadows forever," Lena said. "That's not freedom. That's a different kind of cage." "Perhaps," Eleanor allowed, "but it's still a choice. And you've chosen to stay. That means something." Lena turned to look at the older woman properly. "How long have you worked for him?" 15 years, Eleanor said, "since his father died and Victor took over the family business. I've watched him build an empire, make enemies, consolidate power. I've seen him be ruthless, calculating, and absolutely merciless when necessary." She paused. "And in all those years, I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about you." "That's not care," Lena said. "That's obsession." "Can it be both?" Eleanor asked gently. "He's not a normal man, Lena. He never will be. But that doesn't mean his feelings aren't real, just different, more intense, more absolute. More dangerous," Lena added, as, "Only to those who threaten what's his," Eleanor said. "To you, he'll be whatever you need him to be. Patient, protective, devoted. He's already proven that by waiting 3 years." Lena stood and moved to the windows again, watching gardeners work on the grounds with quiet efficiency. "What if I can't do this? What if I can't be what he needs?" "He doesn't need you to be anything," Eleanor said. "He just needs you to be here. The rest will follow in its own time." The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. Lena explored more of the house, finding a library that took her breath away with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and rolling ladders. She discovered a music room where a Steinway grand piano sat waiting, its keys pristine and perfectly tuned. Eleanor mentioned casually that Victor had bought it after learning Lena had taken piano lessons as a child, before her father died and money became too tight for such luxuries. Everything in this house was a reminder of his surveillance, his knowledge, his obsession, but it was also evidence of care, in its own twisted way. He'd built a home designed around fragments of information about her preferences, her past, her lost dreams. That evening, Victor returned to find Lena in the library, curled up in a leather chair with a book she wasn't really reading. He stopped in the doorway, just watching her, and Lena felt her skin prickle with awareness before she even looked up. "I didn't hear you come in," she said. "I know, you were concentrating." He moved into the room, loosening his tie. He looked tired, she realized. Not physically exhausted, but carrying the weight of whatever business he'd been handling. "How was your day?" The question was so mundane, so domestic, that Lena almost laughed. "Surreal. I found the piano." "Do you play?" Victor asked, though they both knew he already knew the answer. "Not for years," Lena said. "Not since I was 10. "Play for me sometime," Victor said. It wasn't quite a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. "When you're ready." Lena set down her book. "Victor, we need to talk about tomorrow. You said you want to introduce me to your world. What does that mean exactly?" Victor poured himself a drink from the bar in the corner, then settled into the chair across from her. "It means showing you what my life looks like. The businesses I run, the people I work with, the reality of what you're stepping into. I want you to see it all before the wedding. No surprises." "More honesty," Lena said. "Always," Victor confirmed. "I won't lie to you, Lena, even when the truth is ugly." "Especially when it's ugly," Lena corrected. She took a breath. "I want to go back to the 6th Ward. I want to see my apartment, talk to people I knew. I want to say goodbye properly." Victor's expression hardened immediately. "No. You said I wasn't a prisoner." "You're not," Victor said. "But the 6th Ward is dangerous for you now. People will have noticed you're gone. They'll have questions, and some of them will have made connections to me. Going back would paint a target on your back. So I just disappear? Lena demanded. I just vanish from the lives of everyone I knew without explanation? Yes, Victor said bluntly. That's exactly what you do. Because those people can't protect you, Lena. They can't even protect themselves. All they can do is become leverage against you if the wrong people decide to use them. Lena stood, anger flaring hot and bright. You can't just erase my entire life before you. I'm not erasing it, Victor said, his voice calm but firm. I'm protecting it. And you. There's a difference. I want to say goodbye to Mrs. Chen, Lena said. To the people at the bakery who were kind to me. I want to close that chapter properly, not just abandon it. Victor studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. We'll go tomorrow morning, early. You'll have 1 hour. But my men will be with us the entire time, and if I sense any threat whatsoever, we're leaving immediately. Understood? It wasn't everything Lena wanted, but it was more than she'd expected him to give. Understood. They had dinner together in the formal dining room, the long table feeling absurd with just the two of them at opposite ends. Halfway through the meal, Victor stood and moved to sit beside her instead, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. This is ridiculous, he said, gesturing to the vast empty table. When it's just us, we'll eat in the breakfast room, or the conservatory, somewhere that doesn't make conversation require shouting. Lena looked at him, surprised by the concession. You're trying. Of course I'm trying, Victor said. This isn't just about getting what I want, Lena. It's about building something that works for both of us. I know I'm demanding, I know I'm controlling, but I'm not inflexible. Just obsessive and possessive, Lena said, echoing his earlier words. Always, Victor agreed with a slight smile. But I can work within those parameters. As long as you're safe and you're mine, the details are negotiable. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence, and afterward Victor walked her to her bedroom. He stopped at the door, and Lena realized with a start that he'd never pushed to share a room with her, never demanded physical intimacy beyond those 2 kisses. For someone who'd admitted to obsessing over her for 3 years, he was showing remarkable restraint. Thank you, she said quietly. For tomorrow. For letting me go back. I want you to be happy here, Victor said, even if happiness takes time. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. Sleep well, Lena. He turned to leave, but Lena caught his hand. Victor, wait. He looked back, and Lena saw the question in his eyes. Where do you sleep? She asked. I've been here for days, and I've never seen your bedroom. Down the hall, Victor said. Far enough to give you privacy. Close enough to reach you if you need me. Have you been sleeping? Lena asked, noticing for the first time the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Not much, Victor admitted. I keep thinking you'll disappear, that I'll wake up and find you gone. Lena's chest tightened. This powerful, dangerous man was afraid of losing her. The realization shifted something inside her, some resistance she'd been holding on to loosening slightly. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I told you I'd stay. I meant it. Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You have no idea what those words mean to me. He kissed her good night, soft and lingering, then forced himself to pull away. Lena watched him walk down the hall before closing her door, her heart racing and her mind a tangle of confusion and desire and fear. The next morning came too early. Lena woke to find clothes already laid out for her, jeans, a sweater, boots suitable for walking the broken streets of the 6th Ward. Eleanor had thought of everything. The older woman appeared as Lena was finishing breakfast, her expression concerned. Are you sure about this, dear? Eleanor asked. Going back might be harder than you think. I need closure, Lena said. I need to see it one more time before I can really let it go. Victor was waiting in the foyer, dressed casually in dark jeans and a leather jacket that somehow made him look even more dangerous than his expensive suits. 2 of his men flanked him, both armed and alert. Ready? Victor asked. Lena nodded, and they headed out to the car. The drive from Victor's estate to the 6th Ward felt like traveling between worlds. Manicured lawns gave way to chain-link fences, pristine buildings to crumbling facades, order to chaos. Lena watched the transformation through the car window, feeling a complicated mix of relief and loss. This had been her world for 18 years. It had nearly killed her, but it was also the only life she'd known. They parked near Moretti's bakery, and Victor's men immediately took up positions, scanning the street with professional wariness. Victor stayed close to Lena as they walked, his hand at the small of her back, his body positioned to shield her from potential threats. The bakery looked the same. Grimy windows, the same tired pastries in the display case, the same smell of yeast and desperation. But when Lena pushed open the door, Marco Moretti's face went white. "Miss Hart," he stammered. "I didn't expect— Mr. Moreau said you wouldn't be coming back." "I won't be," Lena said. "I just wanted to say goodbye properly." Marco nodded frantically, clearly terrified of Victor's presence. Of course. Take your time." Lena moved through the small shop, trailing her fingers over the counter where she'd spent so many hours. The other employees stared at her with wide eyes, whispering among themselves. She could imagine what they were saying. Lena Hart, the invisible girl, walking in with Victor Moreau like she owned him. If they only knew, the truth was the opposite. Mrs. Chen came in while Lena was there, and the old woman's face lit up with recognition before clouding with confusion at the scene. "Lena, child, where have you been? I've been worried." Lena crossed to her, taking the old woman's hands. "I'm okay, Mrs. Chen. Better than okay. I'm sorry I disappeared without saying goodbye. Things happened very fast." Mrs. Chen looked past Lena to where Victor stood, silent and imposing, and understanding dawned in her eyes. "I see. You're moving up in the world." "Something like that," Lena said softly. "Be careful, child," Mrs. Chen said, her voice dropping. "Men like that, they're dangerous." "I know," Lena said, "but I'll be safe. I promise." She said goodbye to the handful of people who'd shown her small kindnesses over the months. A word here, an extra break there, moments of humanity in a place that demanded too much for too little. Then she stepped back out onto the street with Victor. "Where else?" he asked quietly. "The apartment," Lena said. "I need to see it one more time." The building looked even more decrepit than Lena remembered. The stairs creaked ominously, the hallway smelled of garbage and mildew, and the door to her family's apartment hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Victor's men checked the apartment before letting them enter, and Lena stepped into the space that had been her home. It was smaller than she remembered. The furniture was shabby and mismatched, the walls water-stained, the single window looking out onto a brick wall. This was what she'd been fighting to keep. This was what she'd been killing herself to afford. "Jesus," one of Victor's men muttered, looking around with barely concealed disgust. "Lena lived here for 15 years, Victor said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Show some respect." The man immediately straightened, mumbling an apology. Lena moved through the rooms, gathering a few items, photographs of her father, her grandmother's necklace, a stuffed bear that had been Tommy's, small pieces of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. "Is this really where you slept?" Victor asked, standing in the doorway of her tiny bedroom. The mattress on the floor, the clothes piled in a corner, the cracked mirror on the wall. "Yes," Lena said. Victor's jaw tightened and she saw fury flash in his eyes. "You should never have had to live like this." "A lot of people live like this," Lena said. "We weren't special." "You were special," Victor said fiercely. "You've always been special. And the fact that the world made you live in this place, work yourself to exhaustion just to afford this—" He stopped, visibly controlling himself. "I'm glad I got you out." Lena looked around one last time, then nodded. "I'm ready to go." They left the 6th Ward behind, Victor's car gliding back toward the estate and the life that was now hers. Lena watched the neighborhood disappear in the side mirror, feeling the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. She'd said goodbye. She'd closed the chapter. Now there was only forward. That afternoon, Victor took her into the city proper, to a high-rise building with his name on it in sleek silver letters. They rode an elevator to the top floor, where Victor's corporate offices occupied the entire space. Glass walls, modern furniture, people in expensive suits moving with purpose and efficiency. "This is the legitimate side," Victor explained as they walked through corridors. "Real estate, investments, import-export businesses. Everything legal and above board." "And the illegitimate side?" Lena asked. Victor smiled slightly. "I'll show you that tomorrow, one revelation at a time." He introduced her to his executives, his lawyers, his accountants. Every single one of them treated her with careful respect, though she saw the curiosity in their eyes. Who was this girl that Victor Moreau was showing off? What did she mean to him? In Victor's private office, floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. Lena stood at the glass, watching traffic crawl far below, feeling vertigo from the height and the surreal nature of her new reality. In 2 weeks, this will all be partially yours, Victor said, coming to stand beside her. When we're married, you'll have access to everything. Bank accounts, property, businesses. I'm not keeping anything from you, Lena. What's mine becomes ours. I don't want your money, Lena said. I know, Victor said, but you'll have it anyway, and eventually you'll learn to use it. Power isn't just about wealth, Lena. It's about options, choices, the ability to shape the world around you instead of being shaped by it. That evening, back at the estate, Victor presented her with a black folder. The prenuptial agreement. My lawyers have reviewed it. Now I want you to have your own lawyer review it. Lena took the folder, feeling its weight. You're really serious about this? About everything, Victor confirmed. There's the attorney I trust who has no connection to me. She's expecting your call. She'll explain everything, answer all your questions, make sure you understand exactly what you're signing. Lena opened the folder and started reading. The legalese was dense, but certain numbers jumped out at her. The settlement in case of divorce was staggering. The inheritance if Victor died was even more so. He wasn't exaggerating when he said he was giving her everything. This is insane, she said. Why would you give me this much power over your assets? Because I trust you, Victor said simply. Because you're going to be my wife. And because I want you to feel secure, Lena. I want you to know that even if something happens to me, even if this doesn't work out the way I plan, you'll be protected. You'll be wealthy. You'll never have to go back to the 6th Ward or anything like it. Lena set down the folder. You're giving me a golden parachute. I'm giving you options, Victor corrected. So you never feel trapped. So you stay because you want to, not because you have to. The manipulation was so subtle, so expertly done, that Lena almost missed it. He was giving her the illusion of freedom while binding her more tightly than ever. Because now, if she left, she wouldn't just be walking away from safety and security. She'd be walking away from wealth beyond measure, from power and opportunity and every material comfort imaginable. He was making the cage so beautiful that she'd never want to leave. You're very good at this, Lena said quietly. At what? At making me complicit in my own captivity. Victor didn't deny it. I'm good at understanding what people need and providing it. You need security, Lena. You need to know your family is safe, that you'll never be hungry or cold or invisible again. I'm providing all of that. Is it manipulation? Yes, but it's also genuine care. I want you to be happy. I want you to thrive. And I'm willing to use every tool at my disposal to make that happen. Lena met his eyes. Even if it means I never really choose you freely? You're choosing me right now, Victor said. Every moment you stay, every time you don't walk out that door, you're choosing me. Maybe not for the reasons I'd prefer, not yet, but the choice is still yours, and I'll take what I can get while I wait for the rest. That night, Lena called the attorney Victor had recommended. The woman was professional, thorough, and surprisingly frank. This prenup is the most generous I've ever seen, the lawyer said. Mr. Moreau is essentially giving you half his empire with no real protection for himself. If you wanted to divorce him tomorrow and take everything, you legally could. Would I survive trying? Lena asked. There was a pause. That's not a legal question. But it's the real question, isn't it? Lena said. The contract is generous because he knows I'd never dare use it against him. I can't advise you on that, the lawyer said carefully. I can only tell you that legally, this document gives you extraordinary power and protection. What you do with that power is up to you. Lena thanked her and hung up, staring at the contract spread across her bed. Victor had covered every contingency, provided for every scenario, given her legal protections and financial security that most people couldn't imagine. And he'd done it all while ensuring she'd never feel safe enough to actually use any of it against him. The man was a genius. The next 3 days passed in a blur of revelations. Victor showed her the illegitimate side of his empire, the gambling operations, the protection rackets, the money laundering through legitimate businesses. He introduced her to men who looked at him with fear and respect, who spoke in careful euphemisms about violence and control. He let her sit in on meetings where deals were made and territories negotiated, where the casual discussion of eliminating problems made Lena's stomach turn. This is who I am, Victor said as they drove home after a particularly brutal negotiation. This is the world you're stepping into, I won't sanitize it for you." "I know," Lena said. She felt numb, overwhelmed by the casual cruelty of it all, but she also understood something crucial. Victor operated by a code. He was ruthless, yes, but he was also fair in his own way. He kept his promises. He protected those under his care. He was a monster, but he was a monster with principles. On the fourth day, a week before the wedding, Victor took her to a jewelry store that had been closed to the public for the afternoon. An elderly man with careful hands presented tray after tray of engagement rings, each one worth more than everything Lena had owned in her previous life. "Choose," Victor said simply. Lena looked at the glittering diamonds, the elaborate settings, and felt disconnected from all of it. These rings were beautiful, but they felt like props in a play she was performing rather than living. "What if I don't want a ring?" she asked. Victor studied her. "Then you don't get one. But tell me why." "Because none of this feels real," Lena admitted. "The rings, the wedding, this whole thing. It feels like I'm watching it happen to someone else." Victor dismissed the jeweler with a gesture, and they were alone in the store. He took Lena's hands in his. "It's real," he said. "Every part of it. I know it's overwhelming. I know it feels impossible. But Lena, in 1 week, you're going to become my wife. That's not a fantasy or a game. That's reality, and I need you to start accepting it." "How do I accept something that still feels insane?" "By taking it one moment at a time," Victor said. "By choosing one small thing that makes it feel more real, like a ring." Lena looked back at the trays of diamonds, then shook her head. "Not these. They're too much, too obvious." "Then what?" Victor asked. Lena thought about it. "Something simple. Something I could wear every day without feeling like I'm wearing a fortune on my finger." Victor smiled slightly. "Practical. I should have expected that." He called the jeweler back and gave him different instructions. 10 minutes later, the man returned with a single ring, a platinum band with a small, perfect diamond set flush with the metal. Elegant, understated, beautiful in its simplicity. "This," Lena said immediately. Victor took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, of course. He'd probably known her ring size before she did. "Now it's real," he said quietly. Lena looked at the ring on her hand, felt the weight of it, and realized he was right. This simple band made it concrete in a way nothing else had. In 1 week, she would marry Victor Moreau. She would become his wife, step fully into his world, bind herself to him legally and irrevocably. And standing there in the jewelry store, looking at the ring he'd just placed on her finger, Lena realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt like acceptance. She wanted this. Not because she had no other choice, not just because of Tommy and her mother and the security Victor offered, but because somewhere in the last week, through all the honesty and obsession and twisted devotion, she'd started to believe that this dangerous, complicated man might actually be capable of giving her something she'd never had before. A place to belong. A person who saw her. A life that was more than just survival. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay what?" Victor asked. "Okay, I'm in," Lena said. "Completely. Not just agreeing to stay, not just going along with it. Actually choosing this. Choosing you." Victor's eyes blazed with an intensity that stole her breath. He pulled her against him and kissed her there in the empty jewelry store, and this time when Lena kissed him back, it wasn't from fear or resignation or even curiosity. It was from want. When Victor finally pulled away from the kiss, his hands were shaking. Lena felt it through the fabric of her coat where he gripped her arms, felt the tremor of restraint barely maintained. This powerful man who commanded fear and respect throughout the city was trembling because she'd finally said yes without reservation. "Say it again," he demanded, his voice rough. "I choose you," Lena repeated, and meant it. "I choose this. All of it." Victor closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, Lena saw something she'd never seen before. Relief so profound it looked like pain. He'd been so certain, so controlled, so absolutely confident in his ability to make her stay. But underneath it all, he'd been afraid. Afraid she'd keep one foot out the door, keep part of herself locked away, never fully surrender to what he was offering. Now she had, and it changed everything. The week before the wedding transformed from preparation into something else entirely. Victor stopped treating Lena like something fragile that might break or run. Instead, he brought her fully into his world, showing her not just the darkness, but also the structure, the logic, the strange honor that governed his empire. She sat beside him in meetings with men who'd killed without hesitation, learning to read the subtle signals of negotiation and threat. She watched him mediate disputes between rival factions with a combination of fairness and ruthlessness that kept the peace through fear and respect. She saw him protect the people under his care with absolute ferocity and punish betrayal with equal conviction. "You're teaching me," she said one evening as they reviewed contracts in his study. "You're teaching me how to survive in this world." "I'm teaching you how to rule it," Victor corrected. "When you're my wife, you won't just be under my protection. You'll be part of my power structure. People will come to you with problems, requests, complaints. You need to know how to handle them." "I'm 18, Lena protested. "I don't know how to—" "You know more than you think," Victor interrupted. "You survived the 6th Ward. You kept your family together through pure will. You fought off attackers and manipulative bosses and a system designed to grind you down. Those skills translate, Lena. You just need to learn the new language." He was right, she realized. The instincts that had kept her alive in poverty, reading people, understanding power dynamics, knowing when to fight and when to bend, those same instincts applied here, just on a larger, more dangerous scale. 2 days before the wedding, Victor's mother arrived. Lena hadn't known Victor had a mother. He'd never mentioned family, and she'd assumed he was alone in the world. But the elegant woman who stepped out of a town car that afternoon was unmistakably his mother. The same sharp cheekbones, the same assessing gray eyes, the same aura of controlled power. "So this is the girl who finally captured my son's attention," Marguerite Moreau said, her accent more pronounced than Victor's, something Eastern European underneath the refined English. She circled Lena slowly, studying her like a puzzle to be solved. "You're younger than I expected. Prettier too, though not in the obvious way. I can see why he's obsessed." "Mother," Victor said, a warning in his voice. "Oh, hush, Victor. I'm allowed to examine the girl who's marrying my son." Marguerite stopped in front of Lena, tilting her head. "Tell me, child, do you love him?" Lena glanced at Victor, then back to his mother. The honest answer would have been complicated, but something in Marguerite's eyes demanded truth. "I'm learning to," Lena said carefully. "He doesn't make it easy, but I'm learning." Marguerite's laugh was sharp and genuine. "No, he wouldn't make it easy. He's too much like his father, and that man made everything difficult on principle." She turned to Victor. "I like her. She's honest. That's rare in our world." Over dinner that night, Marguerite told stories about Victor's childhood. The boy who'd been too serious, too intense, who'd analyzed every situation like a chess match even at age 6. Lena watched Victor endure his mother's revelations with patience bordering on martyrdom and felt something warm bloom in her chest at this glimpse of him as human rather than force of nature. "He used to have a cat," Marguerite said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "A scraggly orange thing he found in an alley. Refused to let anyone get rid of it, even when it clawed up all the furniture. Took care of that cat for 15 years. "Mother," Victor said through gritted teeth. "What happened to it?" Lena asked, genuinely curious. "Old age," Marguerite said, her tone softening. Victor was devastated. Never got another one. Said he couldn't stand to lose something he cared about again. She looked at her son with something like sympathy. "Until you, apparently." After Marguerite retired to her guest room, Victor found Lena on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The night was cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "I'm sorry about my mother," he said, coming to stand beside her. "She has no filter." "I like her," Lena said. "She makes you seem more real, more human." "I am human," Victor said. "Just not a very good one." Lena turned to face him. "You loved that cat." "I did," Victor admitted. "Ridiculous thing, always knocking over vases and sleeping in inappropriate places. But it was mine, and I protected it." He paused. "I've spent most of my adult life avoiding attachments because losing things I care about is unbearable. And then I saw you in that alley, and I knew I was doomed, because I couldn't not care about you, Lena, even knowing it would destroy me if I lost you." "You're not going to lose me," Lena said. "Promise me," Victor demanded, turning to grip her arms. "Promise me you won't disappear, that you won't change your mind, that you'll stay." "I promise," Lena said, and pulled him into a kiss that chased away the cold and the fear and the last of her own doubts. The wedding was scheduled for noon on Saturday. The night before, Lena barely slept, her mind racing through everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks. From collapsing in a bakery to standing on the edge of becoming Mrs. Victor Moreau seemed impossible, like something that had happened to someone else. Eleanor found her in the library at dawn, still in her nightgown, staring at nothing. "Second thoughts?" the older woman asked gently. "No," Lena said, "just thinking about how fast everything changed." "Life does that sometimes," Eleanor said. "Transforms in an instant. The question is whether we're brave enough to embrace the change." "Am I brave? Or just desperate?" Lena asked. "Can't you be both?" Eleanor smiled. "Come on, dear, let's get you ready. You have a wedding to get to." The ceremony itself was small and private, held in the estate's garden under an arbor wound with white roses. Only a handful of people attended: Marguerite, Eleanor, Victor's lawyer who served as witness, and a judge who'd been convinced to perform the ceremony at home rather than requiring them to go to a courthouse. Lena wore a simple ivory dress that Eleanor had somehow acquired, fitted perfectly to her frame. No veil, no train, nothing that felt like costume. Just a beautiful dress and the ring Victor had given her a week ago, now joined by a matching platinum wedding band. Victor wore a dark suit and looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, but when the judge pronounced them married and Victor kissed her, Lena felt something shift fundamentally in her chest. This was real. This was permanent. She was his now, legally and completely. "Mrs. Moreau," Victor murmured against her lips. The name sent shivers through her. Lena Hart was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone powerful and protected and permanently bound to the most dangerous man in the city. The small reception afterward felt surreal. Champagne she'd never tasted before, food prepared by a chef Victor had flown in specially, toasts from Marguerite that were equal parts touching and terrifying in their brutal honesty about what marriage to her son would entail. As evening fell, the guests departed, leaving Victor and Lena alone in the house that was now legally theirs together. They stood in the foyer, the silence heavy with anticipation and uncertainty. "I had the master bedroom prepared," Victor said quietly. "But if you'd prefer to keep your own room, I understand. We can take this as slowly as you need." Lena looked at him. This man who'd upended her life, who'd obsessed over her for 3 years, who'd just married her in a garden surrounded by roses. This man who was offering her space despite the hunger she could see in his eyes, the restraint it was costing him visible in every tense muscle. "Show me our room," she said. Victor's eyes blazed. He took her hand and led her through the house to a wing she'd never explored. The master bedroom was enormous, dominated by a 4-poster bed draped in silk. French doors opened onto a private balcony, and through them Lena could see the city lights in the distance, a reminder of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled. "Lena," Victor said, his voice strained, "I need you to be sure. Once we cross this threshold, once I have you completely, I won't be able to let you go. Not ever. So if you have any doubts..." Lena turned and kissed him, cutting off his words. She poured everything into that kiss. Her choice, her acceptance, her surrender to this impossible situation that had somehow become her life. Victor groaned and pulled her closer, his careful control finally fracturing. "Tell me you want this." "I want this," Lena said. "I want you, all of you, Victor. The obsession, the possession, the protection, all of it." What happened next was tender and fierce in equal measure. Victor's hands gentle even as his kisses turned desperate. Lena's own desire surprising her with its intensity. He worshipped her like she was sacred, whispered her name like a prayer, and when they finally came together it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Afterward, lying in the dark with Victor's arms around her and his breath warm against her neck, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not just physically safe, though that was part of it, but emotionally safe. Like she'd found a place she could finally stop fighting, stop surviving, and just be. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I don't regret this," Lena said. "Any of it, even the crazy parts." "Especially the crazy parts," Victor corrected with a slight smile she could hear in his voice. The first months of marriage were an education. Lena learned to navigate the complicated social dynamics of Victor's world, where every conversation had subtext and every gesture carried meaning. She learned which of his associates could be trusted and which required constant vigilance. She learned to dress for the role she was now playing, to speak with the authority of someone who stood beside power rather than underneath it. But she also carved out spaces that were purely hers. She started taking piano lessons again, and the music room became her sanctuary. She began working with a tutor to finish her high school education properly, then started college courses online. Victor supported all of it, encouraging her independence even as he maintained his protective watch over her movements. Tommy visited during his winter break, and Lena barely recognized her brother. He'd grown taller, healthier, more confident. They spent a week together, and he told her about his classes, his friends, his dreams of becoming an engineer. "You did this," he said on his last night before returning to school. "You saved me, Lena. I know I gave you hell before, but if you hadn't—" His voice cracked. "I'd be dead or in jail by now. You gave me a future." "Victor gave you a future," Lena corrected. "You gave Victor a reason to care," Tommy said. "That's the same thing." Her mother's recovery was slower, more painful. But by spring, Ellen Hart was 6 months sober and working with a therapist to address the trauma that had driven her to addiction. When she finally visited the estate, she cried seeing Lena healthy and happy and safe. "I'm so sorry," Ellen said for the 100th time. "I failed you so badly." "You're sober now," Lena said. "You're trying. That's what matters." But the real transformation was in Lena herself. She'd arrived at Victor's estate broken and exhausted, convinced she was worthless, invisible, disposable. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw someone different. Someone who'd learned to wield the power that came with her position, who spoke in meetings with confidence, who discovered she had a mind for strategy and negotiation that Victor actively valued. "You're terrifying the associates," Victor told her one evening, amusement in his voice. "Dmitri asked me yesterday if you were going to take over the organization." "Should I be insulted or flattered?" Lena asked. "Flattered," Victor said. "It means they respect you, fear you even. That's currency in our world." 6 months into their marriage, Victor took Lena to the ocean for the first time. They flew to a private villa in the Mediterranean, and when Lena stood on the beach watching waves crash against white sand, she felt tears streaming down her face. "You remembered," she said, "that I dreamed about this." "I remember everything," Victor said, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist. "Every dream, every hope, every whispered wish. And I'm going to make all of them come true." They spent a week there, just the two of them, in minimal security. Victor taught her to swim, and they made love on the beach under stars so bright they seemed unreal. It was the first time Lena felt like they were just a normal couple, without the weight of his empire and her complicated past pressing down on them. "I love you," she said one night, the words slipping out before she'd consciously decided to speak them. Victor went very still. "Say it again." "I love you," Lena repeated, turning to face him. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe gradually, maybe all at once. But it's true. I love you, Victor. Your obsession, your protection, your terrible controlling tendencies, all of it." Victor's kiss was fierce and possessive and filled with 3 years of waiting finally vindicated. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you fight," he said. "I'll love you until the day I die. You're my everything, Lena. My reason, my purpose, my home." On their first anniversary, Victor threw a party that made it clear to everyone in the city exactly who Lena Moreau was and what she represented. The estate filled with hundreds of guests, politicians, business leaders, both legitimate and otherwise, all of them there to pay respect to Victor and his wife. Lena wore a gown that cost more than her old apartment building, diamonds at her throat and ears, her hair swept up in an elegant style. She moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, charming allies and intimidating rivals, every inch the queen of Victor's empire. "Look at you," Marguerite said, appearing at Lena's elbow. "A year ago you were a scared girl from the slums. Now you're magnificent." "I had good teachers," Lena said. "You had the raw material all along," Marguerite corrected. "Victor just gave you the opportunity to use it." She squeezed Lena's hand. "Thank you for making my son happy. I'd given up hope he'd ever let anyone close enough." That night, after the last guest had left and the staff was cleaning up, Victor found Lena on their private balcony looking out at the city. "Happy anniversary," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I have something for you," Lena said. She'd been nervous about this all day, uncertain how he'd react. "You didn't need to get me anything," Victor said. "I needed to," Lena corrected. She pulled a small box from her pocket and handed it to him. Inside was a simple silver chain with a small pendant, a cat, rendered in elegant detail. Victor stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her with wonder. You remembered. I remember everything too, Lena said softly. Every story your mother told, every glimpse of who you were before you became this. And I wanted you to have something that reminded you it's okay to love things, to let yourself care without fear of loss. Victor pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. How did I get so lucky? You didn't, Lena said. You planned and schemed and manipulated circumstances for 3 years until you got what you wanted. True, Victor admitted, but somewhere along the way, what I wanted started wanting me back. That part I couldn't have planned. As they stood together watching the city lights, Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here. The poverty and exhaustion, the moment she'd collapsed in a bakery, the terrifying realization that a stranger had been watching her for years, the slow transformation from captive to willing participant to equal partner, the evolution of fear into trust, obligation into choice, possession into genuine love. She'd started as an invisible girl with no future, and Victor had seen her when no one else did. He'd built her a life from the ruins of her old one, yes. He'd manipulated and controlled and orchestrated everything to get what he wanted, but he'd also given her safety, security, power, and purpose. He'd given her a place to belong. And somewhere along the way, the gilded cage had become a home. 2 years into their marriage, Lena stood in Victor's study reviewing reports from their various enterprises when she felt his arms wrap around her from behind. You're working too hard, he murmured against her neck. Says the man who works 18-hour days, Lena countered, but she leaned back into his embrace. I have something to tell you, Victor said, and something in his voice made her turn around. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Victor said quickly, but I've made a decision. I'm stepping back from the more dangerous aspects of the business, delegating to people I trust, transitioning the empire to be more legitimate and less likely to get me killed. Lena stared at him. Why? You love what you do. I love you more, Victor said simply, and I've realized that every time I take a risk, every time I put myself in danger, I'm risking our future together. I spent 3 years waiting to have you. I'm not going to waste the rest of my life we have together by getting myself killed over territory disputes or rivals' ambitions. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. You'd really do that? Change your whole life for me? I'd do anything for you, Victor said. I thought you knew that by now. She kissed him, pouring her gratitude and love into the gesture. When she pulled back, she had her own news to share. I'm pregnant, she said softly. Victor froze. What? I found out this morning, Lena said, nervous about his reaction. I was going to tell you at dinner, but Victor let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her down like she was made of glass. We're having a baby, he said wonderingly. You're giving me a family. We're building a family, Lena corrected. Together. That night, lying in bed with Victor's hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, Lena thought about the future. A child who would grow up with everything she'd lacked: security, opportunity, parents who loved each other and would move heaven and earth to protect them. A child who would never know poverty or invisibility or the grinding exhaustion of survival. What are you thinking? Victor asked, his voice sleepy. That I'm not surviving anymore, Lena said. I'm living. Actually living, with plans and dreams and a future I want instead of one I'm just trying to endure. Good, Victor said, pulling her closer. That's all I ever wanted for you. 5 years after their wedding, Lena stood in the garden where they'd married, watching their 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies through the roses while their infant son slept in her arms. Victor was nearby, talking on the phone about some business matter, but his eyes kept drifting back to his family with an expression of contentment Marguerite swore she'd never seen on her son's face before. Tommy had graduated from college and was working as an engineer, happily engaged to a woman he'd met at school. Ellen was 4 years sober, volunteering at a treatment center, and finally finding purpose in helping others fight the demons that had nearly destroyed her. And Lena was no longer the broken girl from the 6th Ward. She was a wife, a mother, a partner in an empire that was slowly transforming into something more legitimate. She was educated, powerful, respected, and genuinely happy. Victor finished his call and came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. What are you thinking about? He asked, the question he'd asked 1,000 times over the years. About how you saved my life, Lena said. You saved mine too, Victor said. I was just surviving before I found you. going through the motions of building power without knowing what it was for. You gave me purpose, Lena. You made me human again. Their daughter ran up demanding attention, and Victor scooped her up with practiced ease, making her giggle. Lena watched them together and felt her heart swell with love for this complicated, dangerous man who'd turned obsession into devotion and possession into partnership. She'd started in a cage, yes, but she'd chosen to stay, and in staying, she'd transformed it. The bars had become walls, walls had become windows, and windows had become doors. She could walk through whenever she wanted, always knowing she'd choose to come home. Because home wasn't the estate or the wealth or the power. Home was Victor, was their children, was the life they'd built together from the ashes of her old existence and his lonely empire. Lena had been invisible once. Now she was seen, valued, loved absolutely. She'd been nobody once. Now she was everything to someone who'd move heaven and earth for her. And if that had required surrendering to an obsession, accepting possession, and choosing a gilded cage? Well, Lena thought, as she watched her husband make their daughter laugh while their son slept peacefully in her arms, some cages were worth choosing. Some possessions were mutual. And some obsessions transformed into the deepest, truest love she'd ever known. She was no longer the girl who'd collapsed in a bakery, invisible and breaking. She was Lena Moreau, and she'd built a kingdom beside the man who'd first seen her when the rest of the world looked away. And she'd do it all again in a heartbeat.